In different stages of life, there's different information. When we're young and hitting puberty, there's health class to teach us about that stage of life. Then when many people become parents, they often attend labor and delivery classes to teach them about what to expect in that next phase of life. But as we get older, there's a lack of information on aging and menopause. And so that's where we open this conversation today. Joining us now is Dr. Kristen Friel from Lehigh Valley Health Network, psychotherapist Shonda Morales, Janika Covington, Kim Bonner, and Michelle Adler, who is also a counselor. Ladies, thank you all so much for joining me.
Sure, thanks for having us. Thank you for having us.
So this is a conversation about menopause, something that's not often said out loud, especially in the public forum. And so Dr. Friel, why don't you start us off? What is menopause right at the core?
Sure, thanks for having us. So menopause is really a clinical definition that's defined by 1 year without a period. So once a woman goes a full year without a period, she is in menopause, and she will continue to be in menopause for the rest of her life. Now, not all women will experience that year without a period. For example, if someone's had a hysterectomy, removal of the uterus, if she has a hormonal IUD in place, so she might experience her transition a little differently. I think about menopause, the menopause experience as sort of two big phases. There's the first initial phase, which about 80% of women will experience those vasomotor symptoms that we talk about: hot flashes, problem sleeping, fatigue, weight gain, lack of libido, just all the things. The list goes on. And every woman's experience during that phase is a little bit different. And then there's really the second phase of symptoms that come a little bit later that have to do with vaginal health and bladder health. We used to really talk about that as just vaginal atrophy, which is a terrible word. But that part of menopause is really now known as the genitourinary syndrome of menopause, which really speaks to the variety of symptoms that women can experience in that phase, which has to do with painful intercourse, vaginal dryness, irritation, and bladder symptoms like urgency and frequency. And so all women who are born with ovaries will go through this transition at some point in their life. The average age in America for this to happen is around 51, 52. I also think that the conversation around how women manage that transition not only has to do with the hormones, which everybody wants to talk about, but also has to do with a bunch of other things that women can really control to chart a course of really health and strength for that latter part of life. And I think prior to menopause, women spend a lot of time taking care of their family, their kids, their work. And the one thing I like about the word menopause is that I do think it's an opportunity for women to literally pause and sort of take ownership of all the things about their life and how they want to think about the next part of their life.
Sure.
And what they can do to chart a course for health.
Sure, some really great information, Dr. Friel. I want to bring Shonda into this. Shonda, you are hearing from women who are experiencing menopause or heading into menopause, and so what are you hearing from them? Is there a lack of information right now?
Definitely. There definitely is. It's getting to be more common. We're talking about it a little bit more out in the media and in the world in general, but I'm still hearing that women are not talking about this with their friends, or they just don't have the information, and they go to their healthcare providers and are sometimes not still getting that proper information. And they're confused and so surprised. Sometimes it can take months, even years, to really realize this is what's going on.
Sure, and so we've brought some ladies here today together to talk about this and bring it to the forefront. And I want to ask the ladies, what has been your experience with this kind of different stage in life that there isn't a lot of information? Janika, why don't we start with you? What's your experience been like?
Yeah, well, I feel like I was kind of like blindsided by it. I actually thought I was pregnant. I remember like it was yesterday. It was probably about a couple of years ago, and I hadn't had my cycle. It was almost like close to 3 months. And so I made an appointment, and I got an appointment, and they did up the blood work and everything. And the doctor, she just came out like, matter-of-factly, like, oh, when women are in menopause, they, experience these things. You may miss your cycle, and, you're not technically in menopause until you've missed it by, a full year. And that's when I I was like, what? There is no way I am, this is not happening to me. I was like 42, 43, and I had no idea. Like, I remember waking up like completely drenched. And I'm just, thinking I had maybe like a bad dream or something like that. I remember getting very, very lack of breath, like having to sit down and, fan myself and stuff like that. But I never had this conversation, with my mom, my siblings, friends, or anything. And it wasn't until that happened to me and I told all my friends, and they're like, wait, well, maybe I'm going through, we're all having the same symptoms. But that was my experience. I never really talked about it openly, and now within the last couple of years you hear social media, oh, my friend Perry, and girl, I got to do this, and go get your bamboo sheets, and all these type of things. But prior to that, absolutely nothing.
Sure. Kim, what was your experience?
So I've actually been postmenopausal, or in menopause, I guess, for 11 years. I was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 42 and found out I was a BRCA carrier, or am a BRCA carrier. So I also chose to get a full hysterectomy at that time. So I went in full blown into menopause. One day to the next. So it was difficult for me because none of my girlfriends were going through it at that time. I had my mom and her friends to talk to, but they weren't my friends. So, it was kind of weird like that. People really didn't talk about it. It was at a time before genetic counseling was really something that was out there a lot. So I really felt alone in a lot of it. But I did have a lot of the hot flashes. The brain fog was terrible. I just, my world is now sticky notes. But otherwise, mostly I struggle with the weight gain. That's just unbelievably frustrating. Some of the libido pieces that you talked about has really been a strain on my relationship with my husband and trying to navigate that. But it's kind of funny now because all my girlfriends are they're starting with the hot flashes, and they all come to me, be like, what did you do? How did you manage this? So at least I feel like I have something to give to them.
Sure, you have that knowledge to give. And
Yeah.
speaking of knowledge, Michelle, tell us about your experience. And this is your experience kind of swayed you into a new career path.
It did. It did. After the death of my son, he died of SIDS at 1 day old. And so, as all of the horror that evokes was true for me, I was then in the throes. I was having a lot of body stuff, if you can imagine, because he was a late baby. I was 40 when we gave birth to him, and so all of the things that you can imagine, the resources, the social isolation, were not there. And then as I am healing from that depression and all of that stuff, now my body is a stranger to me, and I have no idea what's going on. And the world was in chaos, and I was like, this is not okay. And so I made it a point to educate myself, and fortunately, with the support of an amazing counselor, I saw my way out of that darkness, and I was like, wow, this is great. Everyone should have a counselor. And so at 45, I went back to school, and even though I have a master's degree in research psychology, I'm not allowed to take the exam, so I got a master's degree in counseling psychology, and I now have an LAPC right now, and I see and support women from 35 to 65 through this menopause transition, because like Shonda was talking about, the resources for me were just not there. And Shonda and her amazing work, if I had not had the opportunity to meet her right now, I would not have known about the amazing resources that she provides and what is available. And hopefully I'll segue you into being able to talk about more of those resources, so I won't mention it. But the ideas around supporting women at this stage in life are so foreign that I couldn't stand for it. So
Sure.
I wanted to move on.
Thank you, ladies, for sharing your stories. I want to come back over here. Dr. Friel, these different stories of how each woman experienced this stage of life, is that common to be so different and so across the board, just varying?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, there's no, formula for what a female's menopause experience is going to look like. And so speaking to that, I think that there are a variety of options to talk about, but I think, to honor that this is what's happening to me, and let's talk about, what your priorities are, what's bothering you the most is very important. It saddens me and pains me that, it sounds like the medical profession hasn't done some of you guys justice. I do think the tide has changed a lot in the last couple of years, in part because of social media, in part because of some articles that have been published, in part because of Oprah. So I do think people are asking more about this and not, being pushed aside or sort of keeping it inside. And so I think I think there are many more options nowadays than in the past.
Absolutely. Shonda, this is something that touches all aspects of life. You've talked about this in the past, but what do you tell your patients about menopause and their relationships for menopause and the workplace?
Yes, it can obviously spill over to the workplace. We don't live in a vacuum, or we can't shut this off. And so what my experience is with women is that on the surface, it looks like everything's okay. They're still performing really well. They're getting all the things done that they need to get done. But underneath, it's a struggle, and they're feeling like they're just keeping their heads above water. It's requiring so much extra effort and energy to maintain that pace or all of the responsibilities that came more easily to them before perimenopause hit.
Sure, and we talk about menopause versus perimenopause. Can you clear that up for us? What's the difference?
Sure. So, as I said, menopause is defined really as 1 year without a period. Sort of the several years before that is sort of the perimenopause transition. So that is, women's reproductive life includes puberty, then the reproductive years where cycles are relatively regular and normal, coming, every 21 to 35 days, and then things start to change, and things can start to change even up to 10 years before that 12-month mark of no period. And that's really this perimenopause transition. And that's really up in the air as far as how women experience that. It can be just cycle changes. It can be mood stuff, weight stuff, joint pain. There's really, again, even no uniform experience for perimenopause. And for medicine, now we have a little bit of an idea of what to do with that. Most of the symptoms in perimenopause are because of the widely fluctuating levels of hormones. And it's those fluctuating levels of hormones that lead to a lot of the symptoms that women experience. And it's part of the reason why a lot of women will ask, well, check my hormones, tell me where I am. But during the perimenopause, it's not really make sense to do that, because you can check a woman's levels on, this day and then a week later, and they're very different. So it's not very helpful. So it's really about managing the symptoms and what makes sense based on what's bothering a woman the most.
I want to ask the ladies who have gone through this, what do you wish you knew ahead of time? Janika?
I think I just wish I knew, like everything she just said, just information to help us manage, like knowing that, if I wake up in a night sweat, this is what, some things you can do to prevent that or help you manage through it. Just knowing even the basic of what it is to give us knowledge about it, and not just think, or, like me, I was 42 years old and thinking I'm pregnant, and as much as my friends know me, I would have had that baby. I welcome all the babies, but it's kind of frightened you, because you don't know. So to just know something, it would have been helpful.
Kim, if you could give one nugget of information to women out there, what would you give them?
Be kind to yourself. Really, I think that's been like something I've struggled with, and putting myself first and doing the self-care and just giving myself some grace.
Absolutely, giving yourself grace, that's a good one. And Michelle, what's the one thing that you tell your clients and share with them from your personal experience?
I think finding community, finding space that you feel safe and welcomed, and you can talk about your night sweats and vaginal dryness and how that is impacting relationships, and you're 50, you're not dead, it's okay. And a lot of women enter into the rage phase, is something that they've talked about before. And I talk about resources. There are rage rooms in Berks County and in New Jersey. So
I love that resource.
Recognizing resources are available. Should that be something you're looking for?
There you go, absolutely. And Shonda, speaking of all of these little nuggets of information, there is a place that women can come to and experience and learn about more about menopause and the different stages coming up in the spring. Can you tell us about the conference that you're holding?
Yes, Dr. Friel and I are part of the Pennsylvania Menopause Conference. It's the first one in the area in the Lehigh Valley at Foligno Estate and Winery. That'll be May 8th. Speakers and workshops and breakout sessions and lunch in a beautiful setting. And so we welcome everyone. You can get your tickets now.
Wonderful. It seems like a great place to get some much needed information. Ladies, thank you all so much for joining us and sharing your stories.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Anytime.